Hey everyone, it's Classic DM with another first edition AD&D for new players. So we're going to do something a little different this night. We're not going to just keep talking about classes and reading the player's handbook to you too much, but I want to kind of talk about spellcasting in the first edition. And this is a mechanic that's been changed so much over the years. And let's get our creepy background sounds down a little bit. And I'm going to use our old the Steady of the Hill Giant Chief first room again, right? Let's just turn this background sound a little bit so you can still hear some of the rain and the storm and stuff. I love the ambient sounds. Sword Coast Soundscapes. If you haven't been there, this guy has a really cool YouTube channel, and he's very awesomely cool. That's even a word. Too many adverbs. He has it so you can use his stuff in your shows or your casts or your videos as long as you give him credit. And I give this guy always credit. I always put written credit for him, a citation in MLA format, just like Al Purdue says, right? All right, so let's get back on task here. So, spellcasting. I mean, D&D without spellcasting, it's just going to be a melee train game, right? And, when you play all these MMOs and stuff like that, you got mana. I mean, EverQuest 1, it took forever to get your mana back, and I played a bard. I mean, so, bards and enchantments were like mana batteries. They used to laugh at us all the time. You play games like Dark Age of Camelot and Asheron's Call. You can convert stamina to mana and stuff like that. And, over the years, all the MMOs have used a mana bar. And a mana bar is kind of like fuel. So World of Warcraft uses it. They standardized it over the years and gave everyone the same mana pool, and they gave rogues energy and all this kind of garbage. And everyone's struggled with, like, how do you prevent someone from spam casting the living crap out of something? And is that really a bad thing? I mean, Elder Scrolls Online allows you to do that kind of stuff too, but then they have a mana bar that lets you drain it, and there's no cooldown. Black Desert Online has a really neat mechanic where you can use the same ability as many times as you want, but if you someone will have a cooldown and someone will be like not as powerful. Use it again when it's off cooldown. There's all kinds of different ways of doing it. But let's just take a look at some illusionist spells. Okay, I'm not going to go and do magic users too much. I don't want to look at you get all the way past the magic user spells. That's really cool. That's fine. Let's just grab something from the illusionist pool because I love illusionists. Illusionists are just so incredibly creative. I'll have to do a special show just on them. I love Obscura, who is our illusionist from our campaign, and they're currently in the Glacial Frost Giant Jarl. Let's just grab some illusionist spells because not only can we talk about what the spellcasting system, how it works, but we can also talk about what are some of the interesting things you can do with it. Okay, so I tell you what, let's go all the way back to a first level illusion spell. What we got there? That's first level fog cloud. That's cool. Illusion spells, day one. So I'm going to zoom in here. We're like on page 94 of the player's handbook. This is the reprint from 2012, 13 / or whatever. And let's go to this spell right here, color spray. This is a really, really, really nasty, powerful, low-level, first-level spell for the illusionist. Okay? So I keep saying that, okay. I'm going to get South Park sued. So let's put Obscure on the table. So how would that spell work? What's the deal? So there's something about the spells in the first edition. You got to read what they say, right? And you're not just reading the spell and figure out what they do. You need to think about how does spellcasting actually work in combat. So here's how, and there's a specific name for this, and I forgot what the darn name is, but there's a specific mechanic that they use in first edition, which is kind of weird, but everyone's always kind of said, well, okay, that's kind of cool. We'll just keep doing that. And they changed it later on with the Sorcerer in 3.0, 3.5. Of course, that means Pathfinder as well. And I'm not sure how it is in 5th edition because I have not really dug into 5th edition yet. This is the 40th year anniversary, last year was, of 1st edition for me. And this year I'm going to jump into 5th edition, make some content, some modules for it. But basically, everyone gets to memorize X number of spells for the level that they're at. So you just, okay, let's just take a look at a character, all right? Take a look at Obscura. Same kind of thing for the illusionist and for the healer, for Entola, our cleric. So you got, first level spell for the healer. You got Sanctuary and Cure Light Wounds memorized 5 times, right? Seems kind of, not 4 times, not 3 times, not 6 times, but 5 times. And you take a look at the Druid, it's the same kind of situation. And tell you what, let me do this way. Make this a little easier for myself. I'm going to pop this open again. And so you're like, why are they memorizing it multiple times? Seems kind of weird, right? It is kind of weird. In fact, once you play a bunch of RPGs, computer RPGs, you start to get to this point where you're like, why is this spell, why do I have to memorize it so many times? Let me just change this navigation grid real quick. This show high, navigation, thumbnails. This will help get us the size back. Let's go back down to where we were. We were talking about the spells for, let's just take a look at the Druid. So level 1, she has Animal Friendship, Entangle, memorized 4 times. It's like, how many bullets do you want in your gun? It's like 4 hollow points, 2 regular. You know, you have a shotgun if you're a duck hunter, or deer hunter, or you know, you got so many double up bucks, so many slug, and so it's kind of like picking your ammunition loadout. Now, why would you need to do that? Why can't you just cast the one spell whenever you want? Well, there's no mana pool. There's no like number that's being counted down. Say, oh, you can cast Fireball, but you ran out of mana. That means you can really only cast it 4 times. I mean, if you played a healer, buddy of mine played a healer in EverQuest 1. It's a great cleric, raid healer, right? Hardcore raid healer, casting complete heal, 10-second cooldown, 10-second timer count out on the Ventrilo channels, or calling out who's next and using chat logs and all this hardcore healing stuff. Hardcore healing in EverQuest 1 is the hardest thing to do in the whole world. So the mechanic in first edition is this: memorize the spell as many times as you need to cast it, because every time you cast it, you magically have forgotten it. But you haven't forgotten it enough to not cast it a second time. So I'm just going to draw here on the board to keep it from being too boring to look at, right? So let's just get these guys out of the way. Let's say you got, here's a spell. We'll just call it Spell Triangle, right? And you have a spell, this is not PlayStation stuff, Spell Square and Spell X. And those are the 3 different spells you have. And you memorize this one twice, and you memorize this one 3 times, and you memorize this one once. So you're in a big combat situation, and Big Ogre's here, and you're like, oh my god, let me cast this spell here. So you cast this square spell. Maybe it's like blocks him in a piece of ice or something. And you take 1 tick off of here. So now you only know how to do it 2 more times, which is kind of weird. If you're an MMA fighter, you can do that head kick forever. If you are using a gun and you run ammunition, that kind of makes sense. So in some ways, but the explanation is just so weird. It's like, well, you've had to study and memorize these complex spells. It's like memorizing how to do a incredibly complex physics orbital calculation with, you know, taking into consideration gravitational pull. As you try to imagine the most complicated math you could do. And there's people out there in the real world that can do math more complicated than either one of us. And then once you've done it once, it fades from memory. And like, okay, well, how come I memorized it 3 times? So after the 3rd time, my brain is so taxed I can't possibly do it again? Yeah. So that's kind of the explanation that they use. And it's weird because it doesn't really make any sense, and it's just been that way ever since. Later on, when they made the Sorcerer, and I think they did it to the Bard too, they started saying, well, you know what, let's give them a charisma pool. You can cast this, you know, the Sorcerer could cast any spell they wanted from their known list of spells. And it didn't matter how many times they cast it. So that's like in 3.5 and 3.0. So if you were a sorcerer and you knew spell square, triangle, and X, you could cast this one 16 times if you wanted to, as long as you had enough resources to do it, if I remember correctly. I can't remember the exact way that it worked. It was based upon like a charisma pool. So, but if you cast, like say this is a 4th level spell, and if you cast that 4 times, you would exceed, that's what it was, you could see the number of slots. That's how it was. Let me explain that again more clear. Oh, someone's going to correct me and laugh at me. Let's say this is a 4th level spell, a 3rd level spell, and a 1st level spell. And say you can know this 4 times, 3 times, maybe this one 3 times. So you can cast any of the spells that you happen to know. There's some you don't know. You don't know these ones that aren't filled in, but you know these. So you can cast this one 3 times, this one 1 time. Or you can cast this one 4 times, this one, this one, this one, and this one. As long as you don't exceed the number of spells that you know. So that was an interesting mechanic. I kind of like that, but even at that was kind of weird. So now let's take about a step even closer. What was really weird about this. And I have some suggestions at the end here on how to make it more fun for your gameplay. So you have spells that have verbal, somatic, and material components. So one thing you'll see on spells is, look up here in the right hand corner. For the cast color spray, you need VSM. So what VSM? You're like, what is that? It's not some kind of healthcare plan option. So verbal means speaking. So this is a verbal component. So that means you can sit here and say a bunch of words. I mean, if you ever played Ultimate Online, we all know what corpore means, and so Calvas Flam and all this kind of stuff. So you're saying magical words. You're standing there doing nothing with your hands, holding your staff, no magical stuff coming out of a pouch. You're just standing there, you just yell out a bunch of stuff, like hold, whatever, right? And there's a lot of spells in Cleric that do that. They're like power word, stun, all this kind of stuff. So that's a verbal component. S is somatic. So somatic, and that sounds kind of weird, right? You learn a little about Latin, I guess, when you learn play first edition. Somatic means doing movements with your hands. So if you're going to cast a somatic spell, you could be saying some magical words and twisting your little hands around or whatever. That's what that's supposed to be. So If the spell has a verbal and somatic component, that means that Brutus, the goofball here, comes over and decides to hit you in the head. Okay, let's tilt this down so you can see him a little better. Close-up shot on Brutus bashing you in the head. In fact, we'll just move this over here so you can see a little better, a little less light. You're in the middle of casting some spell, and Mega Chode is going to hear bust you in the face. You're going to be in deep trouble. We'll bring this a little closer like this, and we'll refocus this for you. There we go. So we got Mr. Hill Giant. You're casting a spell. It's verbal. Well, you could yell verbal and duck down like an MMA fighter does. They're trying to avoid a head kick or something. You could duck down like a military soldier trying to get behind. You can still say the words. But if you're doing a somatic component, moving around and trying to cast spells while you're running down this way, it's not like you're chopping a bunch of onions on a table and doing some kind of Gordon Ramsay move. You probably would get interrupted. So it kind of implies that you need to kind of pull up and stop. And we've seen this happen in a lot of the MMOs. All the MMOs, RPGs, you start casting spells. I mean, look how they handle spell casting for the Control Wizard in Neverwinter. Or look how the spell casting's handled in Neverwinter Nights, the first one, not Never Nights 2, done by Obsidian, world's worst camera system. And look at how it did in D&D Online. Look how it's done in Baldur's Gate. And so when you have a somatic component, it makes you pull up and stop. So you're casting incantations in one location. Now, the last one is material, which is pretty obvious, which means you need something in your hand. But what they did in first edition, they went really creative with this. So they have all these really crazy material components. So if you get to read the spell in the very, very bottom, unlike the monster manual entries, it will tell you what the material component is. So here he is right here. The material component of this spell is a pinch. The material components, there's more than one, is a pinch or a pinch each of the powder sand colored red, yellow, and blue. Red, yellow, and blue, not RGB, not red, green, and blue. Red, yellow, and blue. I don't know why they chose those colors. So red, yellow, and blue, mix those colors together, you make these prismatic, beautiful colors when you're casting a spell. So let's talk more specifically about casting this spell, right? In fact, we'll put a mini up here. Who do we got that deserves to die? And put this big fire giant dude here my wife painted. He looks amazing. Let's pull the camera back so you can see him a little better. All right, so this guy's over here. Here's this big chode. And you're standing here. You're going to cast a spell. Let's do it like this, right? He's here. And he's like, I'm going to get you. All right, so big dude here wants to bust your face open. And you're going to cast color spray. There we go. So how does it work? So upon casting a spell, the illusionist causes a vivid fan-shaped spray of clashing colors to spring forth from him or her hands. From 1 to 6 creatures in the area effect can be affected. So, there's only up to 1 to 6. You may have to roll a d6 to determine that if you're the DM. So she's sticking her hand out there as a miniature, and this vivid spray of colors when the complete casting spell comes flying out of her hands, right? So what does it say happens then, right? So it tells you who it could affect, and a lot of the spells have to do this. They have to say, well, who's going to be affected by this? Is it going to affect everyone, just some people? Is it just going to affect this guy standing right next to me? Is it just going to affect people that are standing behind me that I'm not looking at? Do I have to target someone in the back and make it affect them? Is it going to affect my buddy that's in my group that's helping me fight, that's over here defending my flank? How's that going to work? So the spell is able to affect 1 level or hit die of creature for each of his or her levels of experience. So a lot of the spells have these kind of details, and you need to read them, and you need to kind of pay attention and think about it. And think about it in terms of what your character is. So she's level 11 illusionist, right? So if she was to cast color spray, what does she get to do? So 1 level or hit die of creature for each of his or her level experience. Okay, that means a total of 11 hit die. So that means 2 5-hit die, bugbears or something? Or maybe 1 8-hit die fire giant, and then maybe 2 orcs. But you couldn't do 4 fire giants. So it's not 1 to 6 fire giants could be affected. So that's an interesting twist. A lot of the spells have these kind of weird stipulations, especially mind-affecting spells, or the ones that either control the radius, like a fireball, like what area it hits, or it tells you, like, how many people can be affected by whole person, how many people can be affected by entangle. And then you'll find every now and then there'll be a couple spells there that don't have those limits, and those are the ones that are really nasty if you're a real power gamer. So, and then, okay, so say she just cast this spell against this one guy, right? No big deal, right? Just one is not exceeding the hit die limit or anything like that. Now, if she's able to cast a spell and even get it off, well, how long does it take to cast? This is one that's even tricky. Not only do you have to kind of pick ahead of time what you're going to memorize, knowing that you need to memorize it multiple times to be able to cast it multiple times over the course of an adventure, you need to be able to pull it off without getting hit and interrupted, and which is something that isn't really discussed a lot in the DM's guide or anywhere else. They talk very briefly on, oh gosh, what is this, page 66? about spellcasting during melee. There's a nice little essay in there that talks about, well, intelligent monsters are able to recognize the danger of spells and will try to prevent you from doing so. In a nutshell, think of it like this. If you get hit with any kind of melee attack while you're doing the somatic component, which is all the spell casting with the fingers and stuff, it's gonna ruin the spell. But what I don't like to do is I don't take it away from you. That means you could try again. It's like you started to do it, and it's kind of like it's like trying to put the car into gear, and you didn't have the clutch popped in right, and you just grind the gear. So you get interrupted. It doesn't mean you've forgotten it. You don't remember what's going on. You're like, oh no, I blew my fireball spell. I can't cast it anymore. So in a lot of MMOs and PvP games, you'll see that what they do, they put the spell on cooldown to prevent you from just trying again. So and in other MMO games, they'll have it where like, well, it doesn't matter. You're being hit. You're still casting anyway because you want to be able to defend yourself because you're just a caster. But in D&D, they kind of have some rules about this. It's like, listen, if you get hit in the face with a two-handed sword and take 14 points of damage, you have 30 health, that's half your life gone. You're not going to continue to cast color spray while that's going on. You've been damaged. So it needs to be you need to think about it as a DM and a player, like, well, how much damage do I really take? So the big fire giant runs up. He sees me casting this spell, winding up this one segment spell, right? It's only one segment, which is 6 seconds. It only takes me 6 seconds to get off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Boom, it's off, right? That's how long it takes. He could run up, go roar, take his two-handed sword, pull it back, take a huge swing at me. Maybe she has fantastic armor class, and if he completely misses her, she could kind of like duck down a little bit and duck back up and still keep the spell going. So maybe it completely misses her. Now, the problem is in Dungeons & Dragons 1st edition, they don't talk about whether a miss is a complete miss or if it's deflected by your armor or you parried it. So what I like to use the common sense there. Let's say how much of the miss really happened, okay? This is all going to connect back at the end, so just be patient with me. I hate to do this, but we're going to put a bunch of dice on the table here. Let's just dump these bad boys out. All right, there's a 20-sided die. Let's say that the fire giant only needed to hit her on... Well, let's make it hard. Let's say you had to hit her, say you had to roll a natural 20 to hit her. So that's a 5. That's pretty low. So if he only hits her on a natural 20 and I roll a 5, that's a pretty big time miss. That's way far away from the target number. That's over what, 75% away from the target number. It's 15 digits on each one of these represent 5% of a complete miss. Say you only need a 10 to hit her, right? And he rolls an 8. That's pretty close. The 10 or higher to hit her. That's pretty close. So in that situation, you might want to say, okay, he takes a big swing at you, but you barely move out of the way. It's not like she's going to parry this two-handed sword with her staff. It's not going to hit her in the robe and her ring of protection is going to make it go ching. You'll read it's interesting, if you read Richard Lee Byers' Disillusion book, which I've gone back and reading again, he does a really good job in his writing. He has a fancy vocabulary, but he does a good job of describing how some of the drow priestesses are getting hit by demons and monsters, and how some of the enchantments on their Pawafi cloaks and stuff are like, and even the guy running away at one point, I can't remember what his name was, the character, he's running away and being shot with arrows and stuff, and it just like goes tink, tink, tink off his cloak. So, some things, I think it depends upon what the role is. So anyway, going back to being interrupted. So as a DM and a player, talk to your DM and say, hey, listen, if I'm a spellcaster and I'm not wearing a robe and I got a magic ring of protection on, some bracers of defense, and this guy comes to take a swing at me and he barely misses, can we kind of make it where, like, what I'm trying to do is get the spell off and just kind of move and shift my weight to the left or right and avoid it, kind of like a boxer would avoid being hit in the face with just use a little body movement or footwork. And the DM might say, yeah, that seems reasonable, but but you can make a rule where it's like, this is not in the book now. Say, if he comes within one number low or 2 numbers low, he's actually going to make contact with you, and I'm going to cause an interrupt. But some people are like, well, that's not fair. If he needs to hit you. Well, if he hits you, he does damage. But if he gets below a certain threshold, it means that you just kind of moved and avoided the shot. He took a big, heavy swing. You took a step to the left or right without losing your concentration. But that's a rule you need to kind of make up on your own and figure out how you want to do it. So let's say he did hit her. Say he hits her and does 3d6 damage. And she's got 40 health, and he goes, bam, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10 damage, and she got the 25% of her life taken away with a big nasty nick on her arm. That's going to interrupt her casting a spell. It's going to be her turn, the initiative. If she disengages, he might get an attack of opportunity. She can start winding the spell up again in his face, but 6 seconds, he's going to be able to wind up another big swing. So right when the spell goes off is right when his swing is going to happen. So think about the timing of things, because if you use the same time mechanics that I'm using, which I recommend you do, remember this: 1 round is 6 seconds in combat. Okay, let's just pull this back down a little bit so you can see the main board. Put it about right here. So we're talking about this up here. 1 round is 6 seconds. Well, 6 seconds is a segment. So if you take a look at all the spells in this player's handbook, think of each one of those segments as kind of equaling a round. Let's go back and look at color spray. So it only takes one segment to get that off, right? Now, it says casting time is one segment, and the duration is only one segment. That means once she casts this color spray spell, let's get these other jokers out of the way here, it's only going to last for one segment, which in my game is one round. Let's read some more in the spell, okay? Spellcaster is able to affect number of hit dice. We've said that already. Affected creatures are struck unconscious for 2 to 8 rounds. So this is where it gets tricky. Now, if you're going to compress time like I am, you'll see this if you watch some of the G1 and G2 modules that we run. Since I'm calling 6 seconds a round, which I believe is how it is in 5th edition, that when the book says 2 to 8 rounds, it means 2 to 8 segments, okay? I like to use rounds compressed like that to make the combat feel more action-oriented. No one's going to sit there and swinging back and forth for a whole minute. And we certainly want to have a spell that stuns something for 8 minutes. I mean, 8 minutes of stun is ridiculous. It's like being in a knocked unconscious. I mean, MMA fighters that are knocked unconscious aren't unconscious for 8 minutes. I mean, that would be like in a car accident and major trauma to have that happen to you. So having a magical spell that just, incapacitates you for 2 to 8 rounds, which is really 2 to 8 segments, you might get from 12 to 48 seconds long. I think that's reasonable, okay? So if their level is equal to, and then if they're blinded, if they're different level. So what you do is here is you compare the level of the creature to her, and they're either going to be blinded, or they're going to be stunned, or are they going to be knocked unconscious. So that's a really, really nasty spell, right? So the area of effect is always something else to take in consideration too, right? So it says 1/2 inch by 2 inch by 2 inch wedge. Okay, now what does that mean? Let's pull this, let's pull her over here like this. Let me pull this over here so you can see a little bit better. We're going to tilt this down. Say she's casting at you. Let's say this is the top of, let's put Mercedes here. There's Mercedes. She's standing here. You're PvPing. This is you the illusionist, and let's make that focus. And you're going to cast color spray at the fighter, right? Let's get that focus a little bit. So what are we talking about here? 1/2 inch. So remember, in the 1st edition, when they talk about inches, right? Each one of those inches means 10 feet. But the thing is, in our battle maps, okay, that's this much. In the battle map, we're using 5-inch squares because we're using 28 millimeter miniatures. So we're standing here. This is a 5 foot by 5 foot square. It's 1 inch. So it's 1 inch from here, 1 inch from here. So when they say inch, don't think of the inch in real life. So think of the inch in the 1st edition rules. And 1 inch, as you already remember, when we see people have 12-inch movement rate, really means 10 feet. For example, take a look at the character sheet here. Look at the movement rate of the Illusionist, 12. That's the standard movement rate for human character in 1st edition. So when it says, this spell says 1/2 of an inch, what they're talking about is actually 5 feet. Okay? If it said 3 inches, it would be 3 times 10 feet. So they say this spell had a range of 3 times 10 feet. So this would be 10, 30 feet, and that's a radius that would go like this. It would just extend out 30 feet. So this is like 30-foot radius. Okay? So now when it says 1/2 inch by 2 inch by 2 inch wedge. So what do you really mean when you say that? Okay, what's a wedge shape? So here's a square, a flat edge, here's a triangle leg, and a triangle leg. So what are they actually talking about? Well, it sounds to me like they're talking about a cone, right? Almost like casting Cone of Cold in World of Warcraft, right? So this is the shortest distance. Let's call this X. This is whatever Y and Y, even though it's A, B, and C. These are equal. There's not a right triangle, equilateral triangle, right? These two links here are the two numbers they're talking about that are 2 inch and 2 inch. So when they say something like that and they say wedge, well, this is a wedge shape like a piece of pie, a piece of apple pie. This is the shortest number. This is the longest number. So let's go back to trying to cast a spell on Mercedes, right? In fact, let's make them line up perfectly like this. We'll put her here, and we'll put you here. So you got a wedge-shaped spell, and at the end of the spell, it's going to be, this is 10 feet, this is 20 feet. And that's the length of one of the wedges, and it's only going to be 5 feet wide. So it's going to be this wide, and it's going to go like this. Now in Warhammer Online and even some of the digital versions of some of the D&D things have templates, and templates are great. But when you got a dry erase marker board, surely you can just draw the thing yourself. So in this situation, she's coming up short. This isn't close enough to actually hit her, to hit Mercedes. And so is that going to be a problem? You have to read the spell carefully. Upon casting spell, illusions cast a vivid fan-shaped spray of clashing colors to spring forth from him or her hand, 1 to 6 creatures within the area of effect. So in this situation, there's no one inside this area of effect. Mercedes outside of it, so you would have lost the spell. Now let's do it this way. Let's say, in fact, let's put Vrinjar here. Say this Vrinjar is fighting this hill giant, right? They're going to town. He's backstabbing this hill giant, and she comes up and she goes color spray. She can control this to just affect him, and she can call that out in the game, even though it might be right in front of him, and he might sometimes be kind of he might be dipping in a little bit and dipping out. What you can do, she can do that and kind of the color spray affect just him. So she has enough mastery to understand, like, boom, cast this frontal cone spell, whether it's going to hit him or not. And then once it hit him, then you can determine whether there's a saving throw now. Now, this is where you got to be careful with these spells. You got to read where it says saving throw. What do they mean when they say saving throw? Well, there's a saving throw table. It might be save versus spell. It might be save and take half damage. You need to read the spell specifically and see what it says. So here's what it says here. The spellcast table effect 1 hit die for each level of experience. Affected creature is struck unconscious for 2 to 8 rounds. Their level is less than or equal to the spellcaster. They are blinded for 1 to 4 rounds. Their level or number of hit dice is 1 or 2 greater than the illusionist. So if she cast the spell and this guy was 12 hit dice, he would still be blinded, which means he can't do anything. He wouldn't be able to defend himself. He'd get killed easily. 1 or 2 greater than illusions, they are stunned, like Power Word Stun, 7th level, for 2 to 8 segments. If their level of hit dice is 3 or more or greater than spellcaster, all creatures above the level of spellcaster and all creatures 6 level 6 dice are entitled to a saving throw versus color spray spell. So there is no saving throw table called color spray. So what they're doing is saying you get a saving throw versus spell, and that's you can look that up in the DM's guide. There's a table there to see whether you resist this effect. So, but what it says, it doesn't say what the effect is. What it says, saving throw is special, okay? So it doesn't say, like in Fireball, if you save, you take half damage, unless you're a monk, then you take no damage. But in this situation, you have to kind of say, well, what does that mean? I cast this color spray spell. If I save, nothing happens to me. I'm not affected at all. It didn't blind me. It didn't stun me. It didn't do anything to me. You could do, if you're a DM, you can say, you know what? I'm going to make it still affect, but I'm going to make it do half as long. I'm going to cut the duration in half. Or you could say, you know what? When you cast color spray and you nail this person and he saves versus, I'm just going to give him 1 segment of the effect appropriate for the hit die comparison. And if you say, but if you do a really good job and he doesn't save, I'm going to allow that to extend longer. So that's the thing about first edition that's really strong. You can modify and change that stuff to make it feel interesting, exciting, and epic. You don't need to make it overpowered, but make it feel right, because you can see there's not enough detail there. It doesn't tell you what happens if he saves. You would have to just assume that, like, oh, you save and you resist, and you don't take any damage, nothing happens. So you have all this work trumped up to be an illusionist, to study a spell, to wait to the right time, at the moment of truth, get into the right position, pull the trigger on the spell, have the enemy save, and take no damage. Or have no effect. So that's kind of brutal. So you have to take all that into consideration. So playing a spellcaster in first edition is hard. You have to be a support class. You have to be in the back. You got to understand your templates, where you're going to cast spells, what you're going to hit things. You got to consider the verbal, somatic, and material components. You may have a DM who says, well, do you have enough pinches of red dust in your bag to do this? You might have to, like, reach in your bag, pull out your components, and get it ready. You're just going to have to assume this. Have you ever seen, like, a guy that does a professional shooting competitions, like pull the pistol right out of this holster really, really quick and go bam, 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 then reload real fast? I mean, that's what you are. You're a level 11 illusionist or spellcaster. You can do the same thing without looking. You're seeing a fantastic guitar player just play a guitar solo, not even look at the guitar. They have their eyes closed, they're like swaying back and forth like they're in a trance. That's what it is when you're playing a magic user. You just reach into your pouch. It's instinctual where it is, and you just, like shifting gears of a motorcycle. You don't have to think about it. So it's not like you're futzing around and have to roll some kind of like dexterity check to see if you get your material components out. What's really hard you got to worry about is after you do all this trumped up guessing ahead what you might need as a spell, okay? No one has to do that as a melee class. They just come to the table with their weapons and start swinging. You have to determine when to do it, how far away to be it, who should you do it, and is the timing right to do it, and then when you do it, will they save against it? So all that makes it a huge disadvantage, and you have crap hit points, and you won't ever get good health. So in my mind, I like to kind of play it this way. Here's the way I like to do it. All you need to do is have like a 10-minute break. If your players have wipe out an entire room, kill all these giants, all these dudes are dead, they're all laying on the ground dead, everything's dead, you wipe the whole room out, you're checking the room, checking them for loot, these guys are all dead. The illusionist says, I'm just going to go ahead and recoup my spells real quick. So it would be like you studying for an exam and pulling out a cheat sheet and just going over your calculus formulas real quick for maybe like 10 minutes. 10 minutes is an eternity. It's the length of most Rush songs, right? So you just go through the spell again. You've done it 1,000 times. Just read through it again. It's like someone looking at a guitar tab, right? You play the song a long time. You haven't played this one song in a year. Pull up the guitar tab, take a look at it, just go play it again, especially if you're a level 11 guitar player, right? So there's no real reason for someone to be like, oh, you can only cast this once per day. Well, until you rest again. So the rest mechanic is something they did a pretty good job with in computer games. And some of you may disagree with this because I'm at heart a D&D player and I'm also a computer game designer. So I like things to be about fun, not about, oh, well, the rule book says this is an advanced squad leader, so you can't do that. It's really more about you having the flexibility to change the game. And you'll see there's many essays by Gary Gygax in the original version that say, you know, these are rules we tried to balance. They're being balanced in 76, 77, and 78. The game hasn't really caught on yet. It's not huge. We think this is going to work pretty cool. People love the game because of the style, the flavor, the adventures, the places you get to do, the power curve. But playing a caster is hell on earth in first edition. It's very, very hard. So if you're a DM, you're a player, you want to play a full caster, talk to your DM about it. Hey, you know, I don't want to cast infinite spells from any list like the sorcerer does, but how about just give me, if I can get a 10-minute rest and we secure a room, can I recover my spells? Yeah, sure, why not? I don't have a problem with that. That's what would happen in any other game that you're playing. You're not walking the earth and like Kung Fu and destroying everything. If you have a massive battle with these 4 hill giants are all sitting at this table, and you guys come busting in the room, you and the Druid and Rinjar, and you get to this big nasty fight with these guys over here, and the fight lasts like 10, 15 minutes, and you kill them all, right? And all these guys get wiped out, and all that stuff's done, and then you're, you know, let's just see if we can focus this a little better. There we go. So all these guys are getting wiped out. They're getting killed, and the battle's over with. Boom, boom, boom. These dudes are dead everywhere. That took like, you know, 7 or 8 melee rounds, 22 to 3 minutes, and the Druid's checking this and killing these guys, and the rogue is over here, and you're the illusionist. You want to get at the table here and pull out your spell book and flip through your spell book and try to recoup the spells you use. That's fun. That means you will use the damn spells when you're actually in combat in the first place. So it's kind of a philosophical choice. If you want to play hardcore by the book, by the rules, and then you only want to be surrounding yourself with players who want to play hardcore by the book, by the rules, knock yourself out. Go play a fighter magic user. That way you could do whatever you want to do the whole time and wear better armor, and then only every now and then you just pull out something nasty like lightning bolt in the right situation to really help yourself. That's why a lot of people in first edition used to multi-class, play Thief Illusionist, you know, so I can do lots of cool, exciting moment-to-moment gameplay, but every now and then I can pull a spell out of my backpack and wipe someone out. So those are some of the things to think about when it comes to spell casting, right? Let's talk about one other detail when it related to this stuff, which I want to make sure is kind of clear here. Let's just pull this back a little bit. So here we go. One thing you're going to have to do, if you're going to play first edition, you're getting ready, you're making your character, you're going to play with some friends, you got some old school guys going to run the game, or you and your friends got a copy of the PDFs, you're like, oh, we're going to play the game, it's going to be awesome. What spell should I take? Well, you know, you're really going to have to do your homework. You're going to have to know which adventure you're going to play. Don't cheat and read it ahead of time, but say you're going to be in wilderness adventure, think about what spells you're going to need to use, read the spell descriptions really, really carefully, and then go to the Dungeon Master's Guide and get yourself a copy of the Dungeon Master's Guide and look for the descriptions of the spells and some of the things they say in there, like how to use them. So there are multiple pages in the Dungeon Master's Guide that talk about, I think it's around page 100. In fact, let me get to page 100 real quick. I'll pull it up for you. You get around 100 or so, and you start having these descriptions of all the different spells, what they can do. Where is this now? I'm trying to find this for you. Sonic Combat. Let me just go to the table contents just to start over from scratch on that one. Alright, here we go. Spells, saving throws, experience, morale, the campaign, combat, spell casting during melee, saving throws, how that all works, underwater adventures, spell explanations, 41. Sorry, I was way off. My memory's bad. So let's go down to 41 or so. That's where the darling picture is. All right, let's go up here. Let's just pick some spells. Read these things. Like, here's a good example here. Dispel Magic, probably one of the most popular spells in the whole game. Effects and spells on magic items, see the cleric spell with the same name. Or Rope Trick. the climbing the rope and gaining the safety, the extra dimensional space, are able to see out of it clearly as they're observing through a window about 3 feet wide and 5 feet high. That's an additional detail that's not going to be in here, right? Let's just go find a rope trick. So you go to rope trick, same as the second level magic user spell. Okay, and don't you love it when they do that? It's like a thesaurus. This is the illusion section, so we're going to go backwards. There we go. So one thing you want to do is you're picking the spells, you're reading this. You could ask your DM, it's like, hey, listen, if I do a rope trick and I climb up inside of it and I look out, will anything happen? Well, the DM guide will sometimes have additional descriptions. It says, well, this will look as if you're up inside some magical dimension, and you can see out about 3 foot wide, okay, with half the width of a car window, and about 5 feet high panel of glass. It's like being in some kind of police, well, let's draw it on the board, right? Let's draw that on a board. So you do the cast rope trick, and you're heading up in some area 3 feet wide by 5 foot tall. So if you're standing here in a rope trick, you could see out of it, right? And if you read the actual player's handbook entry on it, it tells you all the details. You piece of rope from 5 feet to 30 feet in length. One of the rope rises in the air until the whole thing's hanging perpendicular. And basically you kind of climb up to a magical rope like, Jack and the Beanstalk, and you go to an extra dimensional space. If 6 people have climbed in, it's going to be pulled up. So you and the whole party could cast rope trick and like climb up into some mystical space. So those spells are really imaginative, but they're very tricky to understand how to handle in combat. So when a player, you're going to play, you're reading the spells, don't just think that I got to find a direct damage or a dot or an area effect spell or a DD spell. Think of what you can do to amplify this gameplay situation by outsmarting the enemies using all the different interesting spells at your disposal, and don't be shy about popping over the Dungeon Master's Guide or reading some modules and see where in the modules they say, a Cloudra is being attacked, she will use this spell to try to escape. Or if you played Baldur's Gate or Icewind Dale or Baldur's Gate 2, notice how Hold Person is nasty in that game. Hold Person and Fear, the way it's handling the 2nd edition and someone's 3rd edition later on, look at how more powerful Fear, Paralysis, and Hold Person is in Baldur's Gate 1, Baldur's Gate 2, Icewind Dale 2. Those spells will ruin it for you. You will have your party bewildered, walking around in circles, looking the wrong way, while the rest of the melee class guys collapse on you and blow you up. So a lot of these spells, it's great that they appear in some of the computer games, but unless you've actually tried using and actually fighting with them, if you don't understand how they work, you're not going to use them properly. So I know it sounds silly, but read the spell descriptions. Think about how you would use it. Think to yourself like, well, okay, if I was to cast a spell, can I cast this in the middle of a fight while Varinjar's fighting this fire giant with a cleric here backing him up? If I cast rope trip right here, what would it do? Well, you need to know what it's going to do in the first place, right? Maybe it's better off to cast something else. If you're going to cast lightning bolt, how does it shoot across the battlefield versus fireball that blows up in a big radius and hurts everyone in the party? And you'll see a lot of Facebook postings about people that don't seem to understand that kind of stuff, like is there friendly fire and all that kind of business. So spellcasting in 1st edition is a little weird. It's extremely powerful. There are some spells in the 1st edition that will instantaneously one-shot and kill something. The secondary effect is like instantly put into a coma and paralyzed, like a tangle is for the Druid. So be aware that hidden away in that player's handbook is some one-shot nasty finger of death type stuff that will really kill things. Phantasmal Killer, all those kinds of spells. Remember, at the same time, you're going to have to save those things to the moment of truth and pull it off at the right time. It's like shooting the 3-pointer in a basketball game right at the buzzer to win the game. So if you like that kind of gameplay, if you want to be the heroic character that really, really pulls things off in a dramatic, exciting way, you want to play a spellcaster. Magic users are usually considered to be damage dealers, okay, like casting lightning bolt and fireball, magic missile. But don't be afraid to play an illusionist. And if you're playing some of the other editions, don't be afraid to play like a scourge warlock or a control wizard in 4th edition. Those other classes have a lot of really neat, powerful things at their disposal that can really change the tide of battle. No one's really done the Druid properly. Only Nevernights 2 allowed you to cast Entangle and Insect Swarm and do all the damage. So anyway, I want to wrap this episode up. It's getting a little long-winded, but that's the key points to remember when it comes to spellcasting in 1st edition. Verbal, somatic, material components. Be sure to understand the geometric layout of the spell, like what's it going to do, what is a radius going to be, what's the difference between a radius and a diameter. Remember, a diameter is the whole width of a circle, not the half part. Understand how long the spell's going to last. Understand how long it takes to cast it. And some of them are like, this can only be cast outdoors. You're like, well, that's not going to work. If you're going to do the Tomb of Horrors or you're doing the Village of Hamlet, you're not going to cast some ice storm if there's no bad weather nearby. So some of those spells are like, wait a minute, why would I ever use this? Well, if you're doing the Glacial Rift or the Frost Giant Jarl, casting Ice Storm is going to come in handy a lot. You can even do it downstairs because there's enough openings that lead out to the outside world for there to be a storm. You might find that some spells are like, well, this is pretty much use it anytime you want it, and the damage is 66. It's not that great, but it's ranged. It's not going to get a nasty saving throw. So a lot of that damage is guaranteed damage. Of all the MMOs and the PvP games, the RPG games done ever since, paying respects for the power of the first edition, the crowd control spells are probably the nastiest. And the reason why it is the most nastiest, in my opinion, is the fact there's not a lot of really good rules about how to handle when someone's stunned and incapacitated. And you've seen that happen a lot with our monk, where she's run around the back of a battlefield and gone pop stun, and I'll actually put a marker on them to show that they're stunned, and then they just get coup de grace and killed by 2 people in 2 rounds. I just basically make the people just beat on them until they die. All right, we're going to wrap this episode up there and leave it at that, but this one about spellcasting, give you a quick insight into it, how the system works, some ways you can change it to modify it. I think if you go with the, can I take a 10-minute rest and regain my spells, that's fine. I still think it's worthwhile to do the memorize the spell X number of times method. Don't change that core method. Maybe just remove the ridiculous study your spell book for 8 hours straight. I mean, even if you play Kingmaker right now on Steam, which is a really fantastic game, really well done, you're going to have to rest. And there's going to be rules like you cannot rest here, your party cannot rest if there's enemies nearby. That's all computer game garbage. Don't worry about that kind of stuff. If you got a room secured and you got the door closed and someone's guarding the door, unless someone runs in the room and interrupts you, sure, you can study your spells. Why not? I mean, you could probably do your 1040 tax form in 10 minutes if you knew what you're doing. You're a smart accountant. So don't let the rule monsters ruin the game for you. And also, I will say this: don't be afraid to try someone else's game system. I mean, this is basically, this is the OGL 1.0 from 2001 or whatever it was came out, and Bullman and these guys that wrote these books, they have a lot of takes on how the stuff should work or could work. Perhaps even more, I would even venture as far to say, is that a more detailed, more useful information than in the original. That's what they're very prolific writers, and those books are fantastic. And you can take ideas from the other permutations of D&D, even 4th edition, and bring them to the table, have a conversation with their DM. And you'll notice, like, hey, listen, can we do whole person kind of like in 1st edition our campaign as opposed to this in 5th edition? And your DM like, yeah, that's pretty cool. How's that work? So the more you know about 1st edition, the more it's going to help you across the board, because ultimately the game is what you want to make it and the way you and the DM want to play it. And, that's the best way to have a lot of fun. All right, cool. We're going to wrap that up, and we'll talk to you again real soon, maybe about Illusionists or things more specific to gameplay and melee combat. Take care. We'll talk to you later.